Welcome to the Silicon Slopes podcast. I'm Ryan Boswell, welcomed by local legend, Steve Young.
Very local legend.
Very, very local.
In certain neighborhoods in Utah.
You've been around here for a little bit, haven't you, Steve?
I was born on the campus of the University of Utah.
Awesome.
My dad was going to law school at the U, and we were in student housing for the first couple of years of my life. And then grew up in Cottonwood till I was in second grade, and then we were moved to New York, and that's where I ended up going to high school and then came back for college.
It's amazing. So, Steve, would you be willing to give your version of your introduction? I'm sure a lot of people have their conceived versions.
I'm a guy traveling along a journey because we're all fellow journeyers, right? We're journeying through this kind of life, and I'm the beneficiary of hundreds of mortal angels that have kind of guided me, modeled for me, given me opportunity, made things hard, created all kinds of agony and pain that have given me opportunities to grow. And so my introduction is that I'm a work in progress, but I'm so grateful for I feel like I'm on the end of a string. And I'm getting swung around as fast as you can. And then when I get used to that speed, string gets longer and faster.
You're barely holding on,
but you're still going. The whole time. Like no matter what, it never slows down. The learning never ends. And now I'm as a dad, just praying that I've modeled well for the kids and have them have a chance to kind of pay it forward. So my story is, as time goes on, less about what I did on the football field or what trophies I've gotten or anything else. I really, it's become a personal journey and family and paying it forward and creating environments. And that's why I love Silicon Slopes, because Silicon Slopes is a platform to kind of amplify bidirectionally, right? So it's giving information to companies that can be really useful, and then actually sends messages out as a concerted effort to kind of represent companies in Utah.
Yeah.
So that bi-directional benefit is kind of the spirit of what I feel akin in my own life for what you guys are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are here at Silicon Slopes Summit, September 30th, day 2 of our summit. Steve, you just stepped off the main stage. How did you feel? What did you think of Summit?
I was really appreciated it because I was able to, talk about some of the things that are important to me in my business. What I learned in football is that integration, which means breaking down all the cultural, emotional, geographic, race, religion, socioeconomic background, language, anything that separates us or could possibly separate us, the more we break those down in a football context, the more respect and love we share with each other, the better football team we are. That lesson is such a truth lesson in life. And so I think that what I got a chance to speak about is in my business career now, 22 years, longer than I played professional football, I've been in private equity, is trying to do the same thing, empower, entrepreneurs, great leaders, businesses to think about their business in this fully integrated way. Like, how do we create an element of love or respect amongst everyone here so the platform can see its full measure? And it's like, in some ways, I'm trying to do the same thing I did on the football field.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the interesting things about being on the field and off the field. It's a common scenario and a common parable that we learn of, right? When athletes go into leadership or motivational speaking. I'd love to just kind of quickly recap what your career at BYU looked like, the transition into the NFL, and then I have a quick question about your first couple of years in the NFL.
Sure. So BYU was tough because I started kind of half begged my way. My bishop in my ward back in New York, Scarsdale, New York, had written thousands of letters to Lavelle Edwards telling him about this athlete that was in Connecticut. That
email would have been much easier.
Yeah, I know, but he had all these letters, and so they gave me despite my relationship to Brigham Young and my heritage, they didn't. They gave me a trip and they gave me a scholarship, but they didn't really know what to do with me. And so my entry into BYU was not with much fanfare. In fact, I was 8th string, and so try to develop a college career from that place is, kind of, like in a race starting, 10 seconds behind a 100-yard dash. I started slowly at BYU, but I caught fire And I'm really grateful for the people, those angels in my life that got me opportunities to kind of show my abilities, and then I got to play, and then the rest, that part is history.
Yeah. So your first couple of years in the NFL, if I remember correctly, you were not the starter. Is that correct?
Right. I was, I went to the USFL first in LA, and I started there. And then when I went to the NFL and joined the 49ers, that's when I was backing up Joe Montana.
Yeah.
And not the job I wanted. I thought that Joe Montana had back surgeries and probably wouldn't play much longer, but the best of Joe Montana was still to be played out right in front of me.
Yeah.
And so I had to go through this humbling time where I had to watch, and I hated watching, but I got to watch the greatest that ever played. So that was a unique experience.
What do you think that period of waiting taught you? You know, you had this great career in college, you moved on to the USFL, and then you moved into the NFL, and obviously you wanted to be on the field, you wanted to be the starter, you wanted to be playing ball.
Yeah.
What do you think that period of waiting for Joe Montana, this other legacy item inside of the 49ers franchise, what do you think that waiting taught you?
The number one thing it taught me was the discipline around the job that I have. I had a job. It's called backup quarterback. It's a job I did not want. It's a job that I didn't appreciate. But what I realized through some conversation I had with people is, if you have a job that you not necessarily is the job you finally want, if there's something else you want, then you better be the best. Then the job you have today, you need to be the best in the world at. So I changed my mindset to be the greatest backup quarterback that ever lived. And it was the most powerful thing to give me jet propulsion into the future. If I would have remained in a place where I resented the job, despised the job, and wanted to get out of the job, and had some kind of and victim, some victim role that I was being victimized by being this backup quarterback. If I maintained that status, I would have never accomplished what I really wanted to do. It was in transitioning to where I wanted to be the greatest backup quarterback that ever lived. In that effort, created the space for me to then go on to whatever else happened. And that was the number one thing I tell people. If there's a job that you're seeking, then take the job you are now and be the greatest that has ever been at that job, and then go from there. And I think that was the most powerful thing about being a backup quarterback.
I think that's a great, just to reiterate for, moving into the tech scene and the business scene where we're at with the viewers of this video and the playback of this podcast, it's an important lesson to understand. We lift where we stand. We need to be the best that we can be in exactly whatever our role is.
100%.
Right?
And then also recognize that in the effort to be the best at where you are, it doesn't have to be aspirational. Just be great where you are. And what will happen is the full measure of you can come out, and the full measure of what's possible can come out. And it might be that you're actually going to stay right where you are. That's okay too. But I think in that effort, there's something really powerful in seeing how good you can get right where you stand. And I think there's a vulnerability that you need to have that I learned through a conversation I had with Steve Covey. I referenced it out on the stage, but it was a question he asked me at the end of our conversation. He said, "Steve, I think that you're on a great platform, being the 49ers at the time, to find out how good you are. But the real question that I need to ask you is, do you want to find out how good you are? Because there's a risk in there." And he told me that, you might not be as good as you hoped you'd be, but with iteration and effort, you can improve. But are you okay finding out how good you are today and into the future? Because it's a question you need to answer. You need to it's not something you think about and then get back to me. Do you want to find out how good you can be? Right where you are. He asked me that point blank in my face. We had a finger up. He's bald. He kind of looked like Yoda, with a big finger. Do you want to find out how good you are? And I reflexively said, yes, I do. I absolutely want to find out how good I am. But in that answer, you have to have the vulnerability to recognize that it might be disappointing to find out how good you aren't, but yet how good you can be. So it's like, I want people to know that this is a fundamental question to ask yourself. Do you want to find out? And then be vulnerable enough to take the answer and then iterate. And no matter where it is, no matter where you're sitting in that space, let's iterate and get better. And I'm going to be the best. And so those are the things that, and that was the question that he asked me in 1991 in the depths of despair as I was playing the 1991 season. And I only tell you this as a reference, as a contextual reference for the possibilities. In 1992, at the end of that season, I was the MVP of the NFL. And I got the award. I remember receiving the award for the MVP of the NFL and thinking about a year before, sitting next to Steve Covey and him asking me in the depths of depression and asking me, so I know the power in that question, in that answer, and in that enablement of thinking about who is it that you really want to be. And that is not, I'm not saying in 1 year you can, all I'm doing is context for giving you the sense of what's possible in your own life. Because I've now had to repeat that same question to myself 100 times. You don't answer it once. You answer it over and over and over again. And you answer it as a parent, as a spouse, as a partner, as a business, in business context, in a church. You constantly have to ask yourself these questions. And so I'm just so grateful I had the experience. Like, people always ask in football, what's so cool about football? What's cool about football is that we don't have the metaphors. We actually fumble the ball. People always say, metaphorically, you fumbled that one, right? We actually fumbled it. We actually can tell you what it feels like to fumble the ball.
We'll put the situation on the ball and we'll fumble it ourselves.
Right.
So.
You threw the interception there. Like that one, like I actually threw it. Like, what is that experience? And so I'm so grateful for those experiences to define the rest of my life, to help me be profitable in everywhere else. And so I don't know, you gave me a microphone, so I keep talking.
Well, that's why we're here, right? We gave you the mic to let you have it. I think there's 3 really good responses to that question that you were asked in 1991, right? The first one is, answering that question is not just a thought or a paradigm shift, it requires action.
Yes.
And it requires you to take action continually, be uncomfortable with the failures that come your way, and seek for ways to improve, to better yourself, and become the best version of yourself that you desire to be.
So, and it seems like it's a self-help book, like, I see 1,000 of those. I want to break it down because I think it's okay if you say to that question, you want to find out how good you are, if you say, I don't know. Like, I'm scared and I don't know. Half of my life is defined in my athletic career of, that nursery book, the Little Train That Could, I think it was called. Yeah. And he used to go up, and how did he get up the hill? I think I can. I always did not, that did not resonate with me. How I did it is, I don't think I can. There was some propulsion that came from the fear of not being able to do it. Rather than saying, oh, I can. For me, how I got through it was, I don't think I can. I'm not sure. And it was a propulsion. Like, there's a fear base.
Did that drive you?
It drove me. The fear drove me. The fear of failure. The fear of I'm not sure. It drove me forward. And so I always think about the train. That I think is like, sorry, bro, but for me, it was, I don't think I can. It was a propulsion. So I want to give space for people that have fears and anxieties in their life, and say to themselves, that can be a propulsion in itself, by being able to say, I don't know, I'm not sure, but you keep moving forward. I just want to give that space, because everyone's like, oh yeah, you just kind of stay positive. And for me, that was not how I did it. I did it in a different way. And I want to make that space for people that think about it the way I do.
Yeah. So I think, when I asked that question about the opportunity for you to transfer from being a backup quarterback to finally being the starter of the
right, I finally got you to the place you were looking for 15 minutes ago. Right?
No, this has been a great conversation. And so a couple of years ago, I worked in the athletics department at UVU, and Mark Madsen is the new head coach.
Oh, he's the man.
2-time NBA champ, played with Kobe and Shaq. Yeah. And what just blew me away was watching his leadership abilities, and his players knew that when their name was called, they needed to be ready. And there was one situation, we were baseline watching, and one of the players got injured, rolled his ankle, needed to hobble off the court. Mark Madsen didn't even think twice, and he said, JJ, you're up.
Yep.
And immediately, player takes off his warm-up shirt. He's like, your name's been called. It's time to go in, and that player was immediately ready. Yeah. And so I think that's a good example to all of us to understand that we may not be 100% comfortable in what we're doing, but the best way for us to grow. We might be the backup
right now.
Exactly. We may be the backup.
But be the best backup you've ever been.
Exactly. And when our name is called, it's time for us to go.
That's a quest that that resonates with me in a very, very fundamental way.
So let's close out and talk about just the transition into venture capital. Venture capital for a lot of entrepreneurs or business people can sometimes be a scary subject, especially people who are trying to break into the space. As you transitioned off the field into the office, let's say, for example, sure. Who did you go to or where did you go to learn about venture capital, and how did you learn that transition into the space? Let's
distinguish a little bit just so I make sure that people, because I have a great respect for venture capital from taking an idea and creating a business. I've been in private equity, which is kind of further along, less risky in some ways, but my venture capital is starting businesses, which I've done 3 times now. And so for me, what I would say about venture capital is there's a lot of things we just talked about. You're going to have to create it, and there's not a template. And how did people help me create something out of nothingness, right? And I think there's a lot of modeling that you can see around, and there are a lot of venture capital self-help books. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people that have written about how to do it, what their experience is. And I think take in all the stories that you can, all the people that can, any entrepreneur that has a story, like try to glean from it and see, and in the end, I think there's an athleticism that I was taught that people would reference my athleticism in football and say, look, Steve, you're going to have to be equally athletic here in private equity or venture capital. And I really now learn what that really means, is that there has to be an emotional athleticism, a kind of a physical athleticism in your personality. You have to be able to do 4 things, hold 4 things in suspense at the same time, and try to accomplish them all in kind of disparate ways, and be able to deal with, hundreds of people in ways that, are very athletic, meaning that I have different tools in my toolkit. I have comedy, I have humor, I have inspiration, I have intensity, I have all these parts of me that I use athletically all the time to inspire, to hold back, to push forward, to create, to hold accountable, and be, because if I have one playbook and one play, and I'm just going to run that play over and over and over again, it's not going to work. To create, you're going to need to be super athletic. And I think that's what I've loved about this second half of my career, this next career, is that it's asked as much of me as my previous career, just not in the same way. It's equally intense, it's equally difficult, but it asks other parts of me to come out, and I'm grateful for that.
That's great. Steve, we appreciate you coming in today. Thank you for coming to Summit. I do have one question. So our whole focus here at Silicon Slopes is to learn, connect, and serve. You've done incredible things to give back to this community. Where can we learn about what you do, connect with you? What's the best way to learn and support you in your ventures?
Well, that's very kind of you. I think I wrote a book. It's called The Law of Love. It's really for kind of a more religious, spiritual audience, but there's a spirit inside that book that I would love you to learn about me, that I'm trying to pay forward, and that would be a connection with me and what we're trying to create, this spirit of abundance that I talked about on stage, and then how to kind of figure out in your own life how to pay that forward and create that space in business and home, in your marriage. It doesn't matter. It's everywhere. And so that's I hope that I'm always connected to Silicon Slopes because I think the spirit of what you're trying to accomplish is kind of what I'm trying to accomplish. So we're aligned.
We are aligned.
All
so
right.
we'll make sure we get a ton of copies of The Law of Love. Steve, thank you for coming on.
Guys.
We appreciate you.
Take care. See you.